right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here with an all-star cast, folks. We're going to be talking about Gen AI and preparing for the AI overthrow because AI won't just affect consumers and business people, it's going to affect software companies. And you're going to see, I mean, it's happening already. You're going to see lots and lots of software companies figuring out where they fit in this new world. And frankly, I think it's akin to some of the really major disruptions that we've seen over the years. If you think about the history of enterprise computing, well, where did we start? We started arguably with the mainframe that lasted for a number of years. You had time sharing, as they called it, because it was very expensive to use the mainframe. Then eventually we moved into the client server era. That's still around. Guess what? Mainframes are still around. These legacy systems, they don't typically go away. They just evolve and become part of newer architectures and newer systems. But we started mainframe and then client server. Then you have early cloud. Remember ASPs, application service providers? I had a smart aleck on the show one day answer a question. I said, what's the difference between an ASP and software as a service? He said, SaaS works. I was like, that's good. I get that. ASPs work too, but this is old technology, right? So software as a service comes around, sort of later cloud. And then what happened? One of the biggest transformations was Kubernetes and containers. So think Docker, and then of course Kubernetes kind of usurped Docker's fame and slipped in there with a free technology to containerize. And I remember when it really struck me is when I found out that MapR, which was a big data platform, it came out of the Hadoop era. They were the third one, first Cloudera, then Hortonworks, then MapR. I remember taking a briefing from MapR, and they said they were refactoring their entire platform to run on Kubernetes. And I was like, all right, this is serious. Everyone is going to be moving in this direction. You're not going to be able to avoid containers sooner or later. It's that big of a deal. Well, I think that this era of Gen AI and these RAG models and these foundational models, it is that big of a transformation. So again, business users are going to have to change. Business users will need to figure out how to use these technologies responsibly. We're going to talk about that on the show today, but so will software companies. I predict that many traditional business intelligence companies are going to be in trouble, but some are doing very interesting things. Alteryx, for example, we had them on a show last year. They have something called Magic Documents, which is an absolutely brilliant innovation. What they do is they allow you to take a report, like from an ERP, for example, load it into the system, and then tell it the target format you want. Do you want a slide deck? Do you want a short paper? Do you want a presentation of some other format? You tell it what you want, how many pages you want, and it just bangs them out. And then you go and curate that and check it. It includes graphs and all kinds of things. And then you can tell it to change the tone. So you can say, okay, I want this version for the board members. Now give me another version for the employees. Now give me a version for the tech people. Now give me a version for investors, what they want to see. And this engine will dynamically spin up all these different versions of the same truth in different layout formats. Think about the amount of time and effort you can save where your teams used to spend days, even weeks trying to finalize these reports. Well, to be able to go from the report out of your ERP to 5 different flavors of a PowerPoint presentation in 35, 40 minutes, that's crazy. It also lets you get a whole lot of stuff done very, very quickly. So, folks, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests today. Let's go around the room. Dave Duggal from Enterprise Web. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing in the world of Gen AI.
Hey, Eric, it's great to be back on DM Radio. So I'm Dave Duggal. I'm the founder and CEO of Enterprise Web. Enterprise Web offers an AI-enabled no-code platform. We use domain knowledge graphs for that ground truth that you were talking about, facts, real-time logical models of a domain to drive intelligent automation. Last May, we premiered with Microsoft the world's first enterprise-grade generative AI for service orchestration. So we're already using generative AI, not just by itself, but also complemented by classic AI and algorithms, as well as analytics to drive real-time, complex, enterprise-grade automation.
Can you get into that real quick? Because that is some pretty interesting stuff. I mean, I talked to a guy last week from a company called Treedence that's doing some really interesting stuff, weaving together for example, inventory systems with marketing systems and sales management systems to be able to spin up marketing campaigns when you have too much inventory of one product and not enough of another. That is true orchestration, multidisciplinary orchestration. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and beyond, we've got your cockpit already. So the one that you described in the opening, you could literally talk to Enterprise Web and do ETL, right? You could build services. You could actually design, deploy, and manage services just by talking to our system, like it's Star Trek.
Wow.
And we're doing this already with some, again, some huge telcos, some huge enterprises, hardware companies, and that have really complex problems and are looking to simplify that, automate it, accelerate the processes, and optimize their use of AI and Gen AI. So we're out there on that automation frontier. And the key, as you noted, there's some strengths and weaknesses to generative AI, right? It's, first it's so famously hallucinates, which to generative AI is not actually, remember, nobody calls a hallucination a bug when they talk about generative AI because it's not a
Right.
bug. It's just a
Right.
response you don't like. It's a wildly wrong response because it's not a logical model. So Enterprise Web uses our graph to sort of contain and isolate and then refine and optimize interactions with LLMs, whether they're in the cloud, open source, or small language models, et cetera. And then, again, then we can use that. We can drive that conversation, that natural language conversation into actions to connected systems. So again, we have that ground truth, we have that connectivity, so we can actually go from conversation to actually taking actions, not just analytics and inference, but actually what you would call system behavior.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, can you maybe get into the weeds about how that happens? Like, give us an example of when you could instruct a natural language assistant to take some action and then it manages to execute that into the system and then report back. How would that work?
Yeah. So if I let's just describe like the user experience. So like the user experience that we now right on our YouTube channel, we already have a demo of it. Is we did one with Intel, Microsoft, Red Hat, and some other providers, and we did a demo where somebody could be an enterprise customer of a telecom, and they might know nothing about the telecom infrastructure, right? They might know nothing about networking, right? But they're users of network, right? They have their own enterprise apps. Let's say they have an IoT app or a computer vision solution that they want to deploy, and they could literally go to Enterprise Web, say, I want a 5G gateway. I want to deploy it at this edge node, and I want to deploy this computer vision app through that 5G gateway, stand it all up, tell me when it's ready, and then manage my SLA. I want it to run for high performance, low latency. And you can talk to the system almost at that speed, right? And the system behind the scenes is abstracting all the actual technical difficulty for you. Our runtime system is working back, it's translating that conversation. So it's actually going back and forth with the generative AI. It's using our graph to say, okay, generative AI, you're not giving us, that's not on target enough. We push back some context back to the generative AI. It comes back with a better response. We go, okay, now we know what you're talking about. We see the systems, we see the broader, because we have a graph, we're not limited to just what generative AI tells us. As soon as we know, oh, it's Eric Kavanaugh. Oh, well, we know who Eric Kavanaugh, he's on our graph. We know what his role is. He's a radio host. We know he's located. We know the kind of applications he uses. So we can bring in what you would call this sort of out of band context
Hmm.
to further improve that response.
Wow,
And then we deliver it to the user. But that's happening at millisecond speed.
that's
So you can
crazy.
imagine what's happening is there's a system-to-system interaction going on at millisecond speed, so that when you hear it back from through Enterprise Web, it's human real time. There's almost no delay. And you could call that intelligent graph RAG orchestration.
Hmm.
It's not just RAG, because we're using a graph for the source of context. It's not just graph RAG, because we're adding intelligence to it. And it's orchestration, right? There's a level of connecting systems and all the elements. So that's in contrast to like creating static pipelines and writing Python code, where you're essentially just reducing everything to a platform-based service, and you could just talk to the system, and the system is building these services in the background.
That's amazing. That really is. I mean, that's like, it sounds like the holy grail.
It's
But
in
this is
50
what I've
meg.
been envisioning, right?
Yeah,
Having these two-way conversations with systems. And I love that you're using a graph. We're hearing about this more and more. A knowledge graph is an incredibly powerful foundation for any kind of information system because you can access it from any kind of application. There are all kinds of apps that want to know what's in that graph. And
yeah.
so what you're enabling is this hyper personalization and what you might call hyper automation, right? Real quick, and then I'll bring in Mike. Go ahead. I'll throw it over to Mike. Maybe you've been around for a while, Mike, so you've seen this kind of stuff before, and you've watched the evolution of natural language processing. Now it's hitting with these transformers, whole new horizons and doing things. But what Dave just described, that sounds to me like it's at the cutting edge. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, it sounds. Actually, I want to go try it. That's gotten me to the point. Okay, send me a link and let me have some fun with that. But
We'll talk
absolutely
after the
agree.
show.
Yes, thanks, Dave. The level of background processing that goes into some of these things is not really evident to, a caller or someone who goes in, the authentication levels, where the data is coming from, and especially the speed. As Dave said, I mean, the conversational piece, to be able to go back and forth without having any mechanical pauses or hesitation, that is really key into making it a smooth, I guess you say, customer user experience that facilitates more interaction and more confidence in the person using the system to use it for more and better things. And as it grows, as it learns, that absolutely makes it, I won't say human-like, but it certainly makes it an extremely useful tool to help augment that person's workflow or information that they need, their confidence in the system. The personalization that does is really key for people saying, especially older people, saying, "Oh, the system knows me. They know about me," so they feel more comfortable and then continue.
That's so interesting, and this is what is getting me really excited, Mike, is that we're fusing together these different worlds of technology. So by leveraging natural language processing, by leveraging this interactivity, for example, you can create this layered architecture that is very effective, that is very fast, and to your point, achieves this personalization. Because if you have a graph like what Dave is talking about, now you can a graph, of course, nodes and edges. Nodes are the entities, edges are relationships or facets, if you will. So it's great for searching for relationships and understanding things. And let's think, what does a customer support person want? They want to know who is this person and what's of interest to them. Well, in a traditional database environment, you can still deliver that stuff. I mean, you can have a system that brings up little tidbits of information, but these language models are so good at spinning up text, even relevant to specific fact sets very quickly, that all of a sudden you can have like the super intern helper for a customer support person while that high value client is on the phone, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been around for quite a while. So in the early days, as you said, I mean, you go to a customer's database to find out if a caller comes in and say, "Who's this person?" You hit the API with the phone number and you find out all the data that that customer has about them. So, in an automated system, that's one way of doing personalization, and we've been doing that for quite a while. As you said, the new way is probably that, along with augmenting that with an LLM or an informational database. There's so much public information out there. There's companies that actually, dredge for public information about specific people, and there's so much information, and it's easily retrievable. So all those pieces really help a customer service agent in accomplishing a task. And in the case of SmartAction, we do intelligent virtual assistants. If we can't help a person through their questions, or we have some very large customers, then we'll transfer to a live agent, and that live agent will get the data we've captured on the phone, plus anything else that we've been able to glean, and
Yeah.
have that pop on the screen for the live agent. So the live agent just picks up and greets the person by name, what they're calling about. We know this is going on. Here's your last order, a chip, anything else you need to know. So it's a much friendlier and more, uh, I guess, amenable experience. I mean, people call to get something solved. They don't call just to talk. They say,
You're
I need
right.
to know something. If you give them that information right up front, they're happy. That's the main thing. And data availability is the key.
Yeah, this call may be recorded for training and training large language models, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
but you
Yes.
can, because you can pull this stuff in. And, like one of the aha moments for me was realizing that when you train these models or fine tune them, it's not so much that you're capturing exact strings of text, but you're just adjusting the weights and biases and the parameters, which is a little bit lossy in a sense, but it's also more powerful because as long as it's been trained well enough on a particular domain, and we're seeing a real focus on this on ontologies or domain expertise for specific models. As long as you've done that, it becomes extremely knowledgeable. And yeah, it might get stuff wrong, but guess what? Humans have been getting stuff wrong for millennia. So it's not like
Yeah, yeah,
we have to target 100%, right? We would want to be like around 95%, right, Mike?
at least. So we've been using what you just described, an ontology-based system for years, probably 14 years already. And we called it Brain 2 in our system, but it was an ontology-based system where you would capture data. And we used, they weren't called LLMs at the time, but we had specific vertical data sets for companies that did, let's say utilities or order management, or like auto clubs, where you do a lot of you've probably, all of you on the call probably have used our systems at one point or another. You just didn't know it was us. But some of the larger companies use us. But we've all used those specific things to make the recognition, to make the focus far more accurate. As you said at the beginning segment, LLMs are all things to all people, and they're pretty accurate. But when you can get to a vertical specific subset, that increases the accuracy phenomenally and makes it far more focused for the people.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? Is focus and having it be good enough to do the job well enough to keep people happy. And you know what I'm really impressed by is how quickly and easily they will change their mind. Just say, no, that's not what. Oh, I'm sorry. The language model comes back. I'm sorry. Here's the
Yep,
correct version. So they're good at all kinds of things like that, right?
it does. It's the self-correcting piece is interesting, and that's only started to happen in the last few years, where intent capture and multiple intent capture has become more accurate. It used to be you'd probably get just one intent, and then the system would get confused because it didn't understand how to connect through
Right.
various articles of speech or verbs, or how to connect the two. But now you have multiple intent capture in a single sentence that a person can say, and the back end system can chunk that down and respond individually. And then, as Day had, you can combine all these pieces of information from three intents and give them a very cohesive answer that makes a lot of sense to people, and they're kind of amazed. They're saying, "Oh, this is
That's
great."
that is crazy stuff. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. I'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, working through some fun and interesting technical difficulties. I had a mouse die on me and then it woke up, but it only wanted to work on my laptop. So there you go. Always helps to have a backup, have failover. We usually have that, but today we're having some fun. So we're talking all about Gen AI, and determinism and probabilism. Probabilistic answers aren't always great. In the break there, David Duggal was talking about how sometimes you want to be deterministic. You want to know for sure how much money is in the bank, or yes, I want to make a left turn right now. And these AI systems, the Gen AI systems, are necessarily probabilistic. There's a lossy nature to them because remember, you're taking text, you're converting it to vectors, to math, and then converting it back to text. So when you do that, there's always some chance that you're going to get a little bit off or even a whole lot off. So you need to have a bit of a reasoning engine in there. And I'm sure these guys are working on all that. But next up, let's hear from Amir Hartman. Amir, tell us a bit about yourself and what you're working on in the world of Gen AI.
Sure. Well, I'm the president of Praxis Enterprise AI Solutions, and we are essentially a kind of AI middleware for companies. So we help connect applications with AI capabilities to try to simplify middleware. It's a kind of a term that's been around for a while. But and then essentially what we try to do as well is focus on, once we've done that for them, focus on building them what we call digital twins. And digital twins have been around for a while now. And historically, it's been really focused on seeing if you can sort of virtualize or replicate virtually a physical asset or process, like an automobile, for example, or a factory floor. But what we're trying to do is create digital twins of subject matter experts. Let's take a professor, for example. It's one of our areas. We work with a lot of universities where we can create a digital twin of a professor, and that digital twin can allocate a lot of time that the professor doesn't have. Obviously, everybody, including us, have a limited time of attention. So rather than setting up, let's say, an office hours, which they have maybe an hour or a couple hours a week, the students can then engage with this digital twin on that subject matter 24/7. And what we found is that they're able to answer the questions about 70% of the time is able to answer the students' questions. So those are some of the things we're doing. Obviously, universities is one use case, but there are other use cases, whether it's lawyers or specialty services like tax and accounting, medical. There's a few other areas we're getting into. But essentially, we're working with these organizations trying to make sure that they're AI ready, and as well as AI literate. You know, one of the issues we see a lot with our enterprise clients is that there's not a paucity of ideas. The ideas around how to use Gen AI are quite plenty. And in fact, our data kind of tells us they're really struggling a little bit with too many ideas. And the issue is that you can see that they're struggling with a lot of pilots. But pilots and experimentations are great, and I'm a big advocate for them because it's a way for us to learn. But we see most companies right now are stuck in kind of a POC or pilot paralysis. They're not really able to take. If you look at all the activities going on, all the pilots, about 10% of them are actually scaled at an enterprise level. So that's something we're trying to help them overcome. Is how do you get beyond pilots? Even though you kind of need to walk that tightrope. You need to experiment and learn, as do your people. You need to upskill your people, but you need to, at the end of the day, really deliver results that matter for the company. So that's what we're focusing on.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of digital twins, and that technology has come a whole long way in the last few years because you can do all sorts of things like simulations.
Exactly.
You can simulate, okay, what if we did X, Y, and Z? What would the impact be? Run the simulation, get some information, some feedback, and then decide, okay, that looks good. Let's give it a try. Not that the sim will always be correct, but at least it gives you the contours of what's possible, right?
That's exactly the case. And in our case, we're trying to take that concept and that construct and see if you can replicate it to a certain degree with subject matter experts, right? You know, a professor is an expert in that particular field, biology, philosophy, whatever it may be. Can we replicate that professor and engage that digital twin with students? So what we talked about the same technology we talked about earlier, RAGs, and then we have a configuration engine that configures their personality and their style. How do you like to engage with your students? What's your approach to mentorship, things of that nature, as well as a personality style. And then you take a knowledge base and put it in a RAG, all their papers, all the textbooks that the class is using, videos, you name it. And then the LLM of your choice, depending on what the company or university likes to use. You know, we're sort of LLM agnostic. So whatever you want to use, that you can fine tune that LLM with that particular RAG and that knowledge base the professor has. In this case, a professor, but in the case, imagine if you're, for example, a Salesforce, right? We've all been in scenarios where you have a couple of top sales guys in your organization. They're always hitting the ball out of the park, exceeding their numbers, and then you have average sales staff, and then who sometimes hit, sometimes miss. But if you could take that the know-how, the tacit knowledge of that top sales guy, and package it up, and be able to serve up best practices, the best statements of work, the best presentations, the tips and tricks, and provide that. If you can improve the staff performance by 5%, 10%, that could be pretty meaningful to an organization. So those are some of the use cases we're trying to deploy.
Yeah, that's great stuff too. And I'm a big fan of being able to borrow from what the successful people in a company are doing. And the fact is, these days you can really do that. You can capture tremendous amounts of information. I mean, think about even corporate email. Now, this is business email, so you shouldn't be doing your personal stuff on your business email. But if you are able, if you get the authority and the capacity to do this, to scrape from all these different emails just from your Exchange server, basically, and understand. And then you look at, all right, well, what does this top salesperson do? What kind of emails is this person sending? Turns out they're short little emails, very pithy, very to the point, very interesting. This other person is sending long emails and they're not working very well. I mean, that's just one example of how you can ascertain signal from all this noise, right? But you can even get down to the words that are chosen, the kinds of sentences, when these emails go out. I mean, that's something I remember about 7, 8 years ago talking to a company that was specializing in figuring out when to deliver email to someone. But the problem is you have to get through the channel. You have to basically get into either Gmail or Microsoft or Yahoo or whoever is actually doing that to leverage that technology. But I can tell you, as someone who's been doing email marketing for a long, long time, it is extremely valuable to know when someone will open an email versus when they won't. Middle of the day, not so good. Early in the morning, usually pretty darn good. Late in the afternoon sometimes could be good too, because they're kind of decompressing. Maybe they've already done a lot of their main stuff for the day and they want to just check some stuff out.
That's
But
right.
being able to personalize that's kind of what Dave Duggal was talking about, right? So that personalization, that's where we're really finally getting somewhere, right, Amir?
Absolutely. I think personalization is an absolute great capability that take advantage of LLMs and create personas that match your target market. And you can think of different scenarios. You can imagine a scenario. You create a set of personas that match your target market, and then you have this sort of perpetual group of folks you can bounce ideas off of about your product. Right? Usually we have focus groups. We get marketing to do a focus group, but now you can have a perpetual focus group that you can configure at will. So obviously, like I said, I don't want to get, I try to be cautious about use case excitement because there are so many out there. Literally, I got off the phone with a marketing executive a couple of hours ago, and they were talking about use cases, and it's just there's not a paucity of use cases. And the issue that they're struggling with is focus and execution. And that's not to say that ideas are bad. Ideas are great, but they're not lacking in ideas. And so, starting to think about what is it that's going to drive adoption, because we're not seeing that scale at the enterprise. We're not seeing adoption in a big way. We're seeing pockets of great ideas. So that's what we're trying to also help them through is, and that starts getting into things that are have nothing to do with technology, right? It has to do with leadership, has to do with change management, has to do with a vision and how you communicate it. I mean, here's a huge issue. I'd love to hear the other guests on this as well. We're obviously leadership, whatever stat you believe in, right? We've seen our data tells us 85% of leaders, senior leaders, are very excited about the potential. However, when you look at how many of them have a program in their organization to upskill their people with AI, how to use AI, how to use it for your day-to-day activities, it's less than 20%. To me, that's a huge problem. It's not only a problem, it's an ethical problem in the first place. But there are so many non-technical issues that need to be brought to the table that folks aren't thinking about because the excitement, Gen AI and ChatGPT sort of sucked the excitement, and rightfully so. I mean, when in November 2 years ago, people were playing with it, we were all blown away. Everybody was super excited. So now it's time to kind of calm down and think about, okay, how do I really drive adoption around these use cases that truly are going to move the needle for my organization?
Yeah, I wrote down your quote. That's hilarious. I'm gonna have to post that on X later. I try to be cautious about use case excitement. I get you. And you're right that there's a whole lot of soft skill development that needs to be done here. And leadership is key. And Dave Duggal, maybe I'll throw this over to you from Enterprise Web. I think the real key is going to be fusing these systems together like you have. I mean, I talked about before the show hybrid search, right? Like these text generative capabilities are very powerful, especially when you overlay them on traditional information systems. So now you can learn about it. I'll give you a perfect example. A guy I know, a very, very smart guy, he works for a very large manufacturer. He said they got hit a little skunk works project and they deployed an LLM and they trained it on a bunch of data that was enterprise data. And they asked it a question and it gave an answer, but it gave them a low confidence score. And they're like, oh, well, it's a low confidence score, so we can't use that. And then someone on the team said, well, why don't we ask it why the confidence score is low? I'm like, oh, good question. Why is this confidence score low? And it said, well, because this data didn't come back from this system and this data looks a bit sketchy and this that happened. It gave them all these answers. They're like, oh, that's what we focus on now. So you can use it in lots of different ways. And, I meant to say this earlier, internally focused ways is where you should always start. Don't just start throwing this out to your customers and partners. Start internally and play around with it and see what kind of answers you get. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, we're still a little bit more on the operational automation side of just instead of just the search. But I think everything that you're saying is true in the sense that, so first, we're using the graph not just to translate the intent of an interaction, we're using it to provide explainability, right? Because as Enterprise Web is sort of an intermediary between the customer or the user and the LLM, and it could, like the others we've just discussed, being multi-LLM, multi-model, as it were. So whatever the LLMs are behind it or other AI technologies are behind it, we're sort of abstracting away those technologies. And we're not just refining and optimizing because we're doing that interaction through the graph. We can explain why we did something the way we did as well. And Enterprise Web, has a unified interface. So it's very easy for us, like we not only have an API interface, we have a UI interface, we have a NLP interface, but we can also use like Cypher, right? We can actually do what's now called GraphQL. We can do a GraphQL interface for search and things like that. Because here's what I would posit, stepping back a second. In a little bit more than a year, or a little more than a year ago, everybody thought there was just ChatGPT 3.5 or 3 at that point, right? And it was, oh my God, it's going to change the world. Then very quick order, we realized, oh, look, there's open source models. And then we were like, oh, look at that. There's small language models. And then all of a sudden there's specialized models and domain-centric models and company trained models. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait. And then those models are changing really quickly too. So there's new versions of these models coming out really quickly. So all of a sudden it's changed the worldview. Like I personally would never make an LLM the center of anything.
Right.
It would, first of all, it's just be irresponsible, right? It's just not good enough. The only thing it could be the center of is a black hole. I just commented that on LinkedIn today. I shared that. But it really should be looked at as just another element of a responsible solution architecture, right? You should say, I'm going to have probably have multiple models, maybe some cloud-based, some on-premise, some large, some small. They're going to evolve pretty quickly, so I'm going to have to put them under management. I might actually have different models for different purposes. And so I really need to do is I need an abstraction. I need a platform over the top of those models that helps me onboard models, manage models, and it makes this the whole process of interacting much more simple because a lot of Amir's point was that, there's so many choices, so complex, and that's actually a sign of the immaturity of the industry, right?
Interesting.
Really, do you think that anybody in the C-suite really cares what model you use? Or how many billions or trillions, parameters it has? No, they don't. They just want to achieve a business goal, an objective, using the best tools for the lowest cost with the best performance, scalability, reliability, security, right? That's every enterprise I know. And so I think that there's been a year of irrational exuberance, if I can expand on the quote here.
Yeah.
With Gen AI. And I think now we're starting to see the enterprise getting a little smarter, getting a little more cautious, backing out of some of the things that they started, which were probably ill-conceived.
Right.
And now they're starting to say, I need to do this enterprise grade.
Yeah. Well, folks, let's pick that up after the break. Very, very good point. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on a very interesting and dynamic DM Radio. We're talking all things AI and preparing for the AI overthrow. In that last segment, we were talking to Dave Duggal of Enterprise Web, and he made a number of really, really good points about how quickly this whole model world is evolving, all the new models coming out, open source models, small language models, which I think are going to be very, very important because you don't need 1 trillion parameters. I mean, I've heard stories where folks have dumbed these things down to it was like 128-bit, then 64, and then 32, and then like 10 point something bit someone was doing. It was still working. It was still doing stuff. And you're like, wow. So we're still in this R&D heavy space. And there's a lot of competition. There's Anthropic. There's, of course, Microsoft grabbing OpenAI. All kinds of things are happening. You've got Grok on the Twitter side. I think he just launched, Elon Musk did a whole new data center with tons and tons of GPUs. So the point is it's moving very, very quickly. That's not great news for the risk-averse chief operating officer, for example, who wants to slow things down. Let's make sure things work. But Mike Vanca, I'll throw this one over to you from SmartAction. You know, the thing I found very interesting that Dave said is that you're going to have these purpose-built models for specific things, like for customer support, for example, or for any number of different tasks for certain industries, for example, where it becomes very important to know the definitions of specific words and how they get used in context. So I think we are going to see sort of shaking out in this industry, and the cream will rise to the top. But what do you think, Mike?
Actually, I agree. We've been doing vertical specific, I guess, small language models. We never called them that, but that's essentially what they were for 15, 16 years. And we even do customer specific language models where we pull data, compile them on the fly, and then we can do a specific subset for FAQs specific to a large customer that only apply to them. So as we said before, the accuracy levels go really, really high when you do that. So I agree that there's a lot of movement in the world out there now trying to decide what to do and which way to go. The large language models are great for the general public to use because they're really amazed by that, and they look at that and they can utilize it in many different aspects of their life. The smaller ones with different customers and vertical specific, as you said, the risk averse COO, they're going to look at those because it's more specific to them. They can easily define the parameters that they want, so it won't go outside of those, so you won't get these widely diffuse answers that sometimes don't apply. And then they want it in something that's easily manageable. So we do a platform as a service, software as a service. So we manage all that and do all that. But I think people are looking, as Dave said, they want an ROI. So what's it going to do for my company? How's it going to return an investment? How am I going to better my company in the eyes of the outside world for like customer experience? And that's really the key. And that's the, things may change out there in the AI world, but those are, as you said before, those are the ground truths. That's it. I need to make a better company. I better have a good culture for my employees. AI should not take away jobs. We were kind of founded on the principle we'll never want to replace jobs. What we want to be able to do is take away all those routine things that people really don't like to do, so that allow the regular employees to really expand their horizons and do more within the company. So all those things go into it. So we didn't design AI to replace people. We designed AI to make a life better for people so that they have a much more interesting work life.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I'll throw this one over to you, and then we'll go around the room and ask the other guests too. When I think about business intelligence, or it was originally called decision support. Well, what are you doing in decision support? You're trying to get insights to make better decisions, is the bottom line. And if you look at the old way of doing that with data warehousing, for example, we used to strip out all the context because we wanted to get those numeric values through the thin pipes to the slow processors from the expensive storage. Well, all those dynamics have changed now. The processors are faster, the pipes are fatter, storage is cheaper, and we don't have to strip the context out anymore. So what I'm driving at here is decision support is going to be revolutionized by Gen AI. Now, you still have to set it up properly. You have to train it or fine tune it or get a good RAG model or whatever. You have to do all that stuff for sure. But at the end of the day, you just want suggestions from your systems. And that's what this new interface allows in game-changing fashion. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. To be able to accumulate, millions of conversations we do, and put that into a database. We've never deleted data. I've never been an advocate of deleting anything that we kept, and compile that into an LLM, and then taking tools to design like the reporting like Dave had. You've now got this vast resource of knowledge that you didn't have before for people calling in or chat or however you did it. You put this in an LLM, and now you've got the reporting tools that you're able to glean all this information to make executive level decisions on what's the direction of the company, or what am I seeing out there, what's different. You look at a dollar amount that's changing, and you can go back to all this, run the reporting, and we've become part of Capacity AI. They have an amazing reporting suite that allows companies to go in and design their own reports to get and glean information from all the different disparate pieces of data, chat, voice, LLMs, and put that together and come up with a comprehensive, I guess, report or executive level decision-making tool. It's really important. Haven't had that ability before yet.
Yeah, it's amazing. It synthesizes. And Amir, I'll throw this one over to you. One thing I've learned about these LLMs, they're very good at writing poetry. So let's think about that. How would they get good at writing poetry? Well, they're reflecting back patterns of lots of good poetry. So I think that to create the metaphor here, when you train or fine tune or use a vector database, a RAG model to infuse your AI system with the richness of all your unstructured data, you are exposing the best of the best. And again, they are consensus engines, so you're going to see a sort of consensual view of the world, if you will, but still you're finally able to use all the pearls of wisdom that are in your PDFs, in your Word documents, your proposals, your emails. Those are all going to shine through with the right prompts. What do you think, Amir?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the fact that multimodal more and more is becoming, real and more powerful. That to me gets very exciting. Whether it's recordings of folks, pictures, products or whatnot, all this stuff simultaneously. The LLM is going to be able to handle that kind of thing and provide interesting insights. I mean, the question for me is that to me is very exciting. I think the question for me, for business leaders, is one where let's assume this is the case, right? We all agree this is trending this way. We're seeing pockets of these things happening. The question then becomes, okay, if I'm a marketer, let's focus on marketing or sales. If I'm a marketer, and let's say AI, we haven't touched upon this a little. We talked about it a little early on, but we didn't really call it this. But let's talk about agentic AI or AI agents.
Yeah,
If
yes.
AI agents are part of the loop, part of the human, part of the purchasing process, for example, how do I, as a marketer, or how do I, as a sales executive, need to adjust to take into account AI agents? We got all our assumptions around product market fit and content marketing, things of that nature, have assumed that we are marketing to humans. Now we've got AI agents as part of the loop. Not to say we have to blow everything up, but we need to account for that in our marketing campaigns, for example. And so
Right.
that to me gets back into, wow, that's interesting. How do marketing need to adjust? Who do I hire that? And if I hire, do I need to look at different skills and what their experiences are? Or are there new jobs that need to be created? Right? We talked about hallucinations, and that's just one example. Is there a job that needs to be created around QAing the output of the LLM, for example?
Yes.
I think so. But Dave, I'd like to hear your take on this.
Yeah, Dave, got 90 seconds. Go ahead.
All right, fantastic. Well, I'll do them really quickly then. So I would go back to the power of ontologies and knowledge graphs and domain model, the ground truth that we've been discussing, the logical model. And I'd summarize it by saying this. We all benefit from having the two sides of our brain, the left side and the right side of our brain, right? One side is the logical, rational side of our brain, and the other side is the creative, juxtaposition, inspired part of our brain, right? If you just had one, you might go in wrong directions, right? But if both of them together are much more powerful, right? We all develop models of the universe as we on an everyday basis, and we evolve them over time slowly as we have new experiences. But then we also have new insights and we have new ideas and allow those things to impact us too, and we predict things and all sorts of stuff. Like that's just what humans do with the left and the right side of the brain working together. I'd submit that the LLM working with a graph essentially is what you really want. You want to bring those two together, the logical,
Yeah.
the rational, the graph, and the sort of inference-based, probabilistic side. And you want to bring those together. You want to take inferences and predictions and probabilities, and you want to use those as inputs into more deterministic or controlled or safe
That's exactly right.
decisions.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly right. We'll pick this up in the podcast bonus segment. We'll be right back, folks. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio. What a fantastic show on the AI overthrow, managing the AI overthrow. It is coming, folks. I promise you. I don't think there will be a corner of the enterprise software world that is not touched or affected by Gen AI. But the key, and Dave Duggal was just mentioning this in the last segment, the key is to be careful how you use these tools together. I thought of an analogy earlier today when some of these misuses of LLMs, like trying to figure if it's sentient. It's not sentient, okay? An LLM is not sentient. It can appear to be sentient because it reflects text back so correctly in such good syntax with good examples and everything, but it's just not. It's not sentient. It's not aware. We're trying to make it sort of aware in the real time inside of the context window, for example, but it's not a real thing. So you want to use these tools properly, and misusing them would be like using two flutes as drumsticks. It's like you could do that, but you're probably going to bend the flute and ruin it, and it's not going to sound very good anyway. So you have to use the tools properly and use them in a certain balance. And Dave, I'll start with you, and then we'll go around the room. It's going to take a little while to figure out that balance. But the key is you have to start playing with this stuff. And I suggest doing it with internally focused use cases where you're using it for decision support, for example. You're using it to better understand your information landscape. And then once you get something that really works clean and it's like 99% or 95% accurate, okay, then maybe start turning that out to your customers and your partners. But what do you think, Dave?
Yeah, no, all good points. I mean, our company's name is Enterprise Web, enterprise grade web scale. So we have a bit of a bias. So we start with trust but verify. So our view is you want to you want to leverage these new capabilities from Gen AI, other deep learning models. And remember, let's really remember, Gen AI won't be the last word in AI.
Right.
It won't be. There are already new kinds of technologies coming out that will supplant it, that are going to be more efficient, with less training, with lower resource and energy consumption, right? So we're just at the beginning of that aspect of deep learning. So, to your point here, I think the enterprise web, we started the biases. Everything needs to be controlled. You can always relax constraints. That's the way to think of it from a software perspective. If I want something to be more open and more just search-based and more creative and discoverable, then I relax the rules, I relax the constraints to allow something to be more freeform. But in general, from where we're coming, as we're automating operations and complex things, is that we actually start saying, okay, this has to be deterministic. We need to drive this so that this is accurate, that it's precise. We can't have a robot arm swing into the area where a human is standing.
Right.
Right so there's controls that you want. So I would say be as governed and strict as you need to be, and be as flexible as you can be. And that's really the balance. A lot of what Gen AI started off was free-formed experimentation. And a lot of that's just going to go away because it's never going to make it into a production environment. It's never going to be deployed in the enterprise. It can't scale. It's not secure. It's not performant. But it was fun and it had its day. But Gartner just published a report today that said, and they used a lowball number, 30% of current Gen AI experiments are not going to.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw that.
I mean, gosh, that's way low. It's going to be like 70% that will never make it to production. And so, but that is my bias, right? Because we're specifically focused on enterprise grade automation, where I think some of the others are Amir and Mike are focused more on that interaction, which is just as valid and also allows for a little bit more fluidity and a little bit more relaxed because it's a conversation that they're governing. It depends. It depends on what the requirements are.
Yeah, and there are still, to your point, there are still other shoes to drop. Let's get some closing comments from Amir. Hartman. Other shoes to drop. It won't be the last word in AI. There are going to be other AIs that come out, and we're going to understand which are good for which purposes, right? Real quick, Amir.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got so many things happening. I think edge AI is I think not going away. It's going to be more and more powerful. We're going to start seeing AI at the source of the data, and that's quite powerful. And I think you're going to see a mixture of things. I mean, if you take some of these established companies, let's say the ERP space. So these are companies that are whether it's Oracle, SAP, whatever. You're dealing with very, very specific data around operations. So that needs to be exact, right? Now they're leveraging Gen AI, but they're not going away from their core systems. So they're approaching their AI with what's called embedded AI, right? So you can kind of use Gen AI to take financial data and create a narrative around financial data that's actually true, right? So it's not like one or the other. They work in concert depending on the task. So I think that's what you're going to start seeing is task-based routing of LLMs, right? Depending on the task, if you need scientific, precise calculations, then you're going to go for a certain, type of AI with a certain type of small language model, for example. If you need more kind of fluidity and creativity, then you can open it up and we reduce or increase the temperature. So
Yeah, that's a great answer. Mike Vanca, maybe last thoughts from you. Other shoes to drop, more developments coming, right?
There always are. I mean, one of our founders, Peter Voss, he's out there. He's working on AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is actually part of what I look at and play with as well. LLMs is probably not going to be a part of that, but to like, when you talked about deterministic and probabilistic and some of the things that, in conversational AI, I mean, the first part has to be more probabilistic, and then the deterministic part is the data that has to support whatever we understand from a person. So it's actually, like you said, right in left brain, Dave, that actually comes into a play when we talk to each other. When someone talks to a intelligent virtual agent, that has to incorporate both sides. So more and more intelligence is coming, perceived intelligence, because what we have now is not, I won't say it's intelligent. It's, as you said, it's all math. The deterministic and probabilistic algorithms that go into retrieving data and assembling that based upon the sequences that are trained in those LLMs
Right.
is what brings out the piece. When we get to the point where we're getting into more general intelligence with other things, that's going to be a while, but then you're going to see another huge breakthrough. And then the constraints that are going to have to go around that are going to have to be even tighter than what we see now around LLM. So it's coming,
Yeah.
as you said, Eric, it's coming. It's going to come fast. And before we know it, it's going to be there. So.
Yeah, it's big stuff. Well, look these gentlemen up online, folks. Mike Vanca, Amir Hartman, and of course, Dave Duggal. You've been listening to DM Radio.